Georgios is there. I'm happy to see you. Welcome to the next session. In the beginning, I have to send my very warm thanks to Petros for bringing us all together during this digital book festival. It's very nice to meet people at a time when you mostly sit at home and don't see anybody. And this also, affects Georgios in a way. We have exchanged a few emails a couple of years ago, but we never had the chance to meet. And I'm extremely happy, Georgios, that we have a chance to meet digitally today. So welcome to this session. And we do all know the procedure. I will first introduce Georgios in a few words, and then you present your book. And then we will have about 15 minutes for questions and answers. Georgios Pallis is assistant professor of Byzantine and post-Byzantine archaeology and art at the University of Athens. He did his studies at the University of Athens, both BA, MA, PhD studies. Before or while he was submitting and defending his PhD dissertation, he worked as an archaeologist at the 24th Ephorate of Byzantine Antiquities. This was in between 2005 and 2013. In the 24th Ephorate of Byzantine Antiquities in Lamia. And I think this is the time when you got interested in the history of the Byzantine city of Lamia, Zitouni. Georgios' dissertation, PhD dissertation, was on the topography of the Athenian plain and the post-Byzantine era settlements, roads, networks, and monuments. And he has turned this into a number of articles that have appeared over the time. His research interests include historical topography of the Byzantine and post-Byzantine era, Middle Byzantine architectural sculpture, Byzantine and post-Byzantine epigraphy, and all these research interests are very much reflected and expressed in the book that we are going to talk about in a few minutes. I should also underline that Georgios participates in the excavations of the Epanokastro in Andros, on the island of Andros. He published on this subject as well, including sculptures, epigraphical monuments, etc., etc. So it's very much centered around these research interests that I just highlighted. The book that Georgios is going to present is called in Greek, από τη Λαμία στο Zitouni, Ανασυνθέτοντας μια μικρή βυζαντινή πόλη. The title has been translated in the program of the festival as From Lamia to Zitouni, Reconstructing a Small Byzantine City. As Georgios points out in the introduction to the book, Lamia, as we all know, is strategically well positioned on the roads leading from northern to central and southern Greece. I just checked it the other days. Nowadays it's situated next to the European road E75 running from northern Norway to southern Greece, all the way down to Crete. The city is known as Lamia. We know this due to two bishops who attended church meetings in the 5th and 6th century as bishops of Lamia. The archaeological report concerning late antique and early Byzantine Lamia is very poor. So there has been a number of archaeological investigations during the last decades, but it's, correct me, Georgios, it's very often just rescue excavations. A lot of the material is still unpublished and unexplored, and you really did a great job of just bringing everything together that you could get access to, and I think this must have been a difficult task. It won't come as a surprise to those who know me that I'm mostly interested in the period before the year 1000, and especially in the so-called Dark Ages and the transitional period. It's interesting to note that Lamia is absent from Procopius' list of Justinian's building program. We do definitely need to find an answer to this phenomenon. And then the big question, of course, is whether the city was continued during the Dark Ages, whether it was abandoned or partly abandoned. So it's really a dark period. I know that we should avoid this termination, but still, it's quite dark. And then out of a sudden, it reappears in the 9th century in the context of the 8th Ecumenical Council under the name of Zitouni, which is not a Greek word, but a Slavic word, which has a lot of implications with regard to the questions what happened during the Dark Ages, the transitional period. And I'm quite optimistic that we will hear something about this from you, Georgios, and I turn over to you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Claudia, for your warm introduction. Good afternoon to all from sunny Athens. And I would like at first to thank Professor Bouras-Vallianatos and all the organizers for this excellent idea to gather all the recent bibliographical production on Byzantine studies. It is very important to have the chance during these days to meet each other, exchange achievements, ideas, views, and especially in these days of isolation. My book, as Claudia had already said, and as you can see in the program, has the title From Lamia to Zitouni, Reconstructing a Small Byzantine City. And the subject is a city in central Greece on a key position, on a key location, which still today be in the middle of, practically in the middle of Greece, and that means for the Byzantine era, in the middle of the main route from the north to the south, from Thessaloniki to Thebes, Athens, Corinth, all the great centers of this era. The main problem and the factor that motivated me to work on this subject is that the medieval past of this city is almost hidden. There is just a castle and everything else is invisible, while we have a lot of information from written sources, immediate and not, and from archaeological finds that prove that this city existed. It was really a city. It was the seat of administrative and ecclesiastical authorities, and it had a castle. And this is the case of many small cities in Greek peninsula, cities that are still inhabited today. We lack their medieval strata. One can see just a castle or a few churches. Everything else is lost. So my contribution was to reconstruct the appearance, the form, the evolution of this city as a case study. And I think this has a general value for many other cities of the Byzantine and Frankish period in southern Greece. I moved to Lamia in 2005 and as a young archaeologist in the Greek Ministry of Culture, and I spent there 7 years. What surprised me, besides the ugliness of the modern city, was this absence of the Byzantine past. And so from the very beginning, I began to collect information, to collect data. And 3 years later, in 2009, I delivered the first preliminary paper in a congress held by the University of Thessaly. Then I decided that I had to put all this material into the form of a book. And so I worked on this for 4 years with some breaks. Although the book is not a very big one, I had to do a lot of work in different fields of Byzantine studies. The material that I managed to gather was that which gave the form to the book, which is divided into 4 parts. After a short introduction in the topography of the city and the surrounding area, the first chapter is dedicated to the late antique period, when the city was already the seat of a bishop and had the role of a center for the local economy. And this local economy was based on agricultural production, and we know this from the ruins of excavated villas in the countryside, which were functioning as agricultural units. Then the second chapter concentrates on the question of the so-called Dark Ages. And here we have the big problem, the question of the desertation or not of the city. The last findings are dated to the 7th century, and then the city appears again in the 9th century under the Slavic name Zitouni. Here we have a big gap, and I'm sorry that I didn't manage to add, to shed some light on this question. The third chapter focuses on the Middle Byzantine period, when we have a new flourishment in southern Greece, especially in the 11th and 12th century. And this is depicted on Zitouni through the architectural sculpture of the era, which is a testimony of building activity and artistic production in the city. 1204 is a very important landmark in the history of the city, as the Fourth Crusade changed dramatically the environment of southern Greece, the political and religious conditions. Lamia became the seat of many Latin and Byzantine authorities. It had the chance to increase its significance as a local center, because the castle of Lamia was now on a boundary zone between the Greeks and the Latins. And this is the reason why the city changed many rulers during the following 2 centuries. At the end, I tried to make some concluding remarks on the evolution of the city and the significance, the role that it played as a settlement on a key location of Greece, of Byzantine and Latin Greece, of course. The book is illustrated with 29 figures, some of them unpublished, from the German Archaeological Institute and the Christian Archaeological Society at Athens. There is also unpublished archaeological material, especially Middle Byzantine sculptures. And there are also two maps specially designed for the edition by the geographer Lefteris Tsouris, which help the reader to understand better the location. All this process had some difficulties and some very nice aspects. The main difficulties were the scarcity of evidence in written sources and the fragmentary nature of archaeological data. On the other hand, I really found fascinating some aspects of this work. I was very happy to see how little by little the image of this city began to become somehow more clear. And also I was really surprised that how this city forms a case study for many other cities and settlements in southern Greece. We have many cases where the medieval past, the medieval strata is hidden, invisible. And the only way to face this problem is to collect exhaustively every little piece of evidence. Mentions in historical texts, in letters, in poems in some cases, inscriptions, all the fragmentary findings in the rescue excavations in the city, pottery, coins, lead seals, and of course modern literature. It was at last fascinating to try to combine and to put all these so different types of evidence into a text and to try to reach a final conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Georgios.